Number 8. Clint Morris. In April of 2021, an elderly New Jersey man was arrested for fatally shooting his neighbor, with whom he'd had disputes in the past. The incident occurred across from the police headquarters in Trenton, with detectives reportedly close enough to actually hear the gunfire. They found 65-year-old Cheryl Jones outside her home. She'd suffered critical gunshot wounds to which she succumbed at the scene. The suspected killer was 90-year-old Clint Morris, who was found inside with a wound to his eye. The investigation is ongoing, but it's suspected they'd gotten in an altercation, at which point the elderly man shot his neighbor dead. Number 7. John and Michael Miller. In 2018, an argument over a dumped mattress resulted in the fatal shooting of a man in West Texas. 37-year-old Aaron Howard and his fiancée, Cara Box, had thrown the mattress in the dumpster behind their home. The following morning, they found it back on their property, so they dumped it again. Their neighbor, 67-year-old John Miller, then retrieved the mattress and threw it in the couple's backyard. John and Howard started arguing, at which point the former pulled out a handgun from his shorts. John's son, 31-year-old Michael, approached them, holding a shotgun on his shoulder. Howard's brother, who was also present, handed him a baseball bat, which he reportedly never used. The men started exchanging threats, with John telling Howard he was going to kill him if he got any closer. Box, who had started filming the conflict, tried to get between them. John then shot Howard, and moments later, Michael followed suit and was clearly captured on video. 4 gunshots were fired and Howard was struck in the head and chest. He was rushed to the hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. In the aftermath, the father and son were charged with murder. Number 6. Michael Vilkin. On March the 28th of 2013, a California man fatally shot his neighbor over what was described as a year-long tree trimming dispute. 56-year-old John Upton and Michael Vilkin, who was in his early 60s, had been feuding for more than a year over the latter's landscaping efforts. Vilkin had been clearing Brazilian pepper trees on a narrow strip of land in front of Upton's rental home. Vilkin intended to build a house there. In the early 1990s, Upton, a documentary filmmaker and philanthropist, had helped a number of deformed Romanian orphans find homes and treatment in the US. While Upton was generally viewed as a hero by his community, Vilkin claimed he was afraid of him, saying that he acted like a mafioso when they argued. As the two had a late-night argument about the tree trimming, Vilkin pulled out a gun and shot Upton twice, in the midsection and in the head. He died at the scene. Vilkin was arrested and cited self-defense, claiming that he thought Upton was armed as well. No evidence of a second weapon was found at the scene. In 2015, Vilkin, who never expressed any regrets for the killing, was sentenced to 64 years to life in prison. Number 5. Gregory Depray. On April the 23rd of 2005, Fred Fulton and Veronica Descarais, both in their 70s, were brutally murdered at their residence in New Brunswick, Canada. Both were stabbed to death and mutilated. Fulton's severed head was found in a pillowcase under the kitchen table. Before their bodies were discovered, 23-year-old Gregory Depray, who was Fulton and Descarais' neighbor, crossed the border into the US. Border officers found that he was carrying a homemade sword, brass knuckles, a hatchet, a knife, as well as a chainsaw, which appeared to have blood on it. He boasted of being an assassin for the US government who'd killed over 700 people. The weapons were confiscated and he was fingerprinted. Officers found that he was due in a New Brunswick court to be sentenced for a 2004 assault of which he'd been convicted. The victim had actually been Fulton's son-in-law. Depray was a US citizen, and under law, the authorities couldn't send him back to Canada. They contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police but received no information on which to detain him. Depray was allowed to enter the US. The decision would later be heavily criticized, since the weapons and the man's outrageous statements provided legal grounds to detain him on suspicion of mental illness. A few days later, on April the 27th, Massachusetts police found him wandering on the side of the road. They checked for outstanding warrants and found that he was expected in court on that day. By that point, the bodies had been discovered, and the connection to Depray became evident, and DNA evidence would later confirm it. He'd been constantly fighting with Fulton, a feud exacerbated by Depray's drug use. Experts would determine that he was also suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. He was found guilty of the killings, but not criminally responsible for his actions because of his mental illness. Depray is currently held at Shepherdie Healing Center, where his case is reviewed every 2 years. Number 4. Tony Lawrence. In January of 2018, a man was killed and his partner was severely injured after their next-door neighbor attacked them in their home with a crossbow. 28-year-old Laura Sugden was an expecting mother who'd been making wedding plans with partner Shane Gilmer. Their home in Southburn, England, adjoined the house of 55-year-old Tony Lawrence. They'd been arguing for over a year about the loud music that Lawrence would play and the smell of cannabis coming from his home. Unbeknownst to them, Lawrence monitored their conversations with a listening device held against the parting wall. He found out that the couple had been complaining to their landlord. One night, after Gilmer and Sugden had returned from a restaurant, the woman went upstairs to retrieve an electric blanket. In the half-light, she saw Lawrence wearing a headlamp and carrying a crossbow. She slowly retreated to the bedroom and the intruder pushed her on the bed. Gilmer heard the commotion and rushed upstairs, at which point Lawrence shot him with the crossbow. The bolt went through Gilmer's arm and got lodged in his chest, incapacitating him. Lawrence started screaming at Sugden that he'd been listening to them and knew they'd had him evicted. The woman pleaded for mercy and told him she was pregnant. Lawrence then shot a 15-inch bolt into the top of her skull. As he scrambled to reload, Sugden pulled the bolt out of her head. Lawrence wrestled the woman to the ground and started stabbing her in the neck with the bolt. He inflicted wounds so horrific that her voice box was exposed. Covered in blood, she managed to overpower Lawrence and roll on top of him. The attacker broke free and fled in another room. The woman then talked to her dying partner, who urged her to get help for herself and the baby. His last words to her reportedly were, "Be strong. I love you." Sugden ran out of the house and staggered to the home of her neighbors. Her injuries were so extensive that they thought she'd been thrown through a car windshield. They applied pressure to her wounds as ambulances and the authorities were en route. Gilmer succumbed to his injuries, but both Sugden and her baby survived. The police later found Lawrence dead in a camper van from an apparent overdose. Number 3. Jeffrey Spade. In 2021, a Pennsylvania man gunned down his neighbors following an argument over snow shoveling. The incident occurred in a suburb of Scranton, and footage of it, captured by a home surveillance system, subsequently started circulating online. 47-year-old Jeffrey Spade was fighting with his neighbors, James and Lisa Goy, alleging they'd dumped snow in his yard while clearing their cars. The couple, aged 50 and 48 respectively, started screaming obscenities, and James threatened to make his neighbor's life a living hell. Spade then came out and pointed a handgun at them, but the Goys' verbal onslaught continued, with Lisa seemingly daring him to shoot. Spade fired multiple rounds at the couple, hitting them both and causing them to collapse in the snow. He then went back inside to retrieve an AR-15 rifle variant. He shot the couple again, killing them in the middle of the street. Spade then went back into his house and fatally shot himself as the authorities were closing in. The Goys were reportedly survived by a 15-year-old son with autism who was relocated with his grandparents. Number 2. Amber Geiger. In September of 2016, off-duty Dallas Police Department police officer Amber Geiger shot a man in his apartment in Dallas, Texas. 30-year-old Geiger and Botham Jean, aged 26, lived in a building which featured mostly identical floor plans. Her apartment was directly below Jean's. Geiger would later claim she'd entered his home mistakenly thinking it was hers. She'd reportedly found the door slightly ajar. Jean, who was unarmed, was eating ice cream in a darkened living room. Geiger stated that she thought he was an intruder and shot him. Realizing what she'd done, the woman called 911 and Jean was rushed to the hospital where he passed away. Since Geiger was a white police officer and Jean a black man, the racial aspects of the shooting struck existing tensions. Protests followed the initial sentence of manslaughter, which would have implied recklessness. It was updated to a murder charge, with prosecutors arguing, among others, that Geiger hadn't followed police procedure of not entering a building with an intruder inside. She'd shot Jean instead of issuing commands for his surrender or calling for backup from the station, which was only 2 blocks away. A jury ultimately found her guilty of murder and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 served. A number of people, including Jean's family, found the sentence to have been too lenient. Join the They Will Kill You team by rocking the latest merch from theywillkillyou.com. Order yours today to be one of the first to spread the word. Number 1. Anton Fedorov. In April of 2020, during the second week of lockdown in Yalatma, Russia, a 31-year-old man gunned down 5 of his neighbors over a noise dispute. The settlement where the incident took place had only a population of about 3,100 people. Anton Fedorov, a medic with military training, had berated the group from his balcony. He reportedly complained that noise was keeping his baby awake. What followed in the exchange isn't known. Fedorov then took a hunting rifle, which was legally owned, and opened fire on them. 3 were shot dead in the street. Fedorov then went downstairs and gunned down 2 more as they sought refuge in an apartment. Married couple Yevgeny and Kristina Tabunov, both in their early 20s, were among the victims. Fedorov tried to escape but was arrested by the police and faced a sentence of life in prison. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live next to a released murderer or to a frat house? Let us know in the comments section below.